Hi everyone, I hope everybody is doing amazing this holiday season, and we're going to paint this landscape. I call it a winter wonderland forest. So I really like those trees being in the middle of there. It kind of looks like an island, like an oasis basically. So I don't have the reference image. I saw something online, like a picture. It was in Pixabay, so I couldn't really use it, so I tweaked it and I did it in my own way. So my own version, which ended up with having like this kind of like an island in the middle there of those trees. So the trees are painted pretty simple, and it's about painting the sky wet on wet, and then we are omitting the trees there in the middle. And then once we have those areas for the trees paper dry, later on we start adding paint around those trees. So some of that paint will bleed towards the background, so it's like a softer transition, and then whatever we preserve to stay white, that's going to be our snow. So that's about those trees that you see. Then once I was done applying colors for the background for the sky, that's when I decided, you know what, I'm just going to sprinkle some paint in there so to create the snow. So that's when I added white gouache, and I didn't wait for the paper to fully dry. I wanted the paper to be still a little bit wet. Later on, the snow on the bottom there, so there's a very pale wash of colors, so that's the cobalt blue, phthalo blue, and some of the quin red, and then there's a path. So that's what I did with a little bit of paint, and I painted it wet on wet. Now this is the list of all the art supplies that I used for this painting. So this time art is cold pressed. Actually, I just had already pre-cut 6x6, so this was perfect. And then this is cold pressed. And you could do this one on hot press, so you would actually have a softer effect overall. I thought about it, but I didn't have the sheets ready to go, and I really wanted to paint it to make it all on time so I can share it with you during this time now. And the colors, so these are the colors, very simple color palette, and I added some sap green, even like we can't really see much of it in the background there for the trees, but I still wanted some green in there. So I first did like a very rough quick sketch just so I know, okay, this is where's that horizon line, and this is where my path is going to be, and then just couple of those trees. Very quick movement. It's a very quick sketch just so I know what areas to omit, like when I start wetting the background, because the background is going to be painted wet on wet. So I don't want to wet those trees. I just want to go with that water around those trees, and later on I will add the paint in some of these areas so the paint will kind of bleed over towards the sky. Now I am pre-mixing colors, so here you can pause if you need to. Basically it's the same colors that I showed earlier that I have on my palette, but I am also adding some of the quin red to my cobalt blue and phthalo blue. Basically the sky is indigo, phthalo blue yellow shades, and cobalt blue with tiny bit of quinacridone red. So that's my sky. For the trees, it's Van Dyke brown, sap green, a little bit of indigo. That's it. And then for the snow on the bottom, I mostly have cobalt blue with quin red, but then I added a little bit of phthalo blue there as well. So that's when I start to pre-diluting those colors with water. And I do that because once I wet my paper, I need these colors to be ready to grab and go, because my paper will be drying and I won't have that much time to apply all of these colors. So colors need to be pre-diluted with water so I don't spend too much time on mixing these colors while the paper is drying. This is a flat 3/4 size brush, and I am wetting the paper. So just like if I was painting 9x12, 10x14 size, or even larger, I would still take my time. So I would take my time here, and I will take my time here to wet the paper because I want to make sure it's wet. Now this is just the sky for now. So this is just the sky portion, and this is a close-up here so you guys can see how I am going around these trees. So I'm using the shape of this brush to not cover the trees because I want to paint them. It's like wet on wet and wet on dry, I guess, because part of the paint will bleed towards the background. Now it will be like a half and half like ratio, so not too much paint will bleed towards the background. I want to control the paint, like the spreading of the paint. And whatever you avoid, like so you omit some of these areas, that's where you will have that snow for the trees. So it's important not to cover it all up. And now I am mixing again indigo, phthalo blue, yellow shade, cobalt blue, plus there's a tiny bit of that quin red. Starting top right, and I basically wanted to have an area, like most of that sky, I guess it's kind of whitish, so it has a lot of light. But I wanted the paint to spread a little more, so I will be pushing it a little bit more too in a second. For now, I'm just applying the colors wet on wet. The paint doesn't spread as fast and as much because I'm painting with Holbein watercolors. If I was painting with Schmincke, then the paint would just start spreading. Also, but it's a matter of how much water I have mixed in with my paint too. So it's not just the paint itself, but also a matter of how much water you have mixed in with your paint. Because if we do add more water to even these watercolors, then they will start spreading too. So now this is another close-up so you guys can see what I'm doing like around those trees. So purposely not going over the trees and just like that, but I don't want that part on top of the trees to be like just like the way it was. So that's why I am using a smaller flat brush, which is a half size, to spread that paint above. And now just because I'm like pushing that paint, I picked up too much of the paint and then it ended up on that lighter side. It's okay, I can have a little bit of that as long as I can keep the shape of that, those kind of like the sky, I guess. So I want to still move it around, and I can do that with the paint. I can still move that paint as long as the paper is wet, but it's evenly wet. So I can continue doing that. Otherwise, I'm just going to create a bloom. So it's a sensitive, like a kind of moment, like in the area you need to be careful like how much you push of that paint, and it's better to not play too long with it. You just kind of want to let it go and leave. And now I'm going to start working on the trees. So first I will grab, I guess I'll have two brushes. One is round 2 and the other one round 8. So what I'm going to do is with the round 8 first, I am going to wet a little bit like the inside parts of the trees. But in the meantime, I just diluted some of the indigo with sap green. So I mixed sap green with indigo and Van Dyke brown. So now this is the first thing. I am just wetting a little bit the inside of those trees. Just a little bit. And now with that round brush 2, where I also have now on this brush, so it's sap green, it's a Van Dyke brown, and indigo. So all of those 3 colors. So you see how I am like omitting some of these areas to stay like paper dry or paper white. And that will be my snow. And then the parts that I'm like placing colors over the background, that paint will dry softly because it's painted wet on wet. And so the paint doesn't spread too fast and too much. I just need to keep an eye on the amount of water I have mixed in with my paint. So that's when you want to have anywhere between half and half and heavy cream-like ratio. And then just to avoid going most thick in the middle, but you do want some colors from the trees in the middle there too. So it can't be just completely white. You do want to have some of that sap green with Van Dyke brown and indigo in there too. So just find your trees and place some of these colors there, and it will look natural as long as you let some of that color, the paint, to land on the sky, so the background there, and then you will omit some of these areas to stay paper white. And then you can add some colors, just kind of switch colors too, like let's say you have like a darker tone, so it's like, let's say indigo and Van Dyke brown. So now grab a little more of sap green, so you see that sap green in there as well. So you want to have variation too of those colors. So from far maybe it would look dark, but the thing is that once you see it up close, those are trees, like we have the green in there. So that's my island. So the oasis, we have all these trees in there. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create some snow. So in the back there, I am diluting white gouache with water. I'm using a round brush too. the ratio needs to be more like milk-like ratio. So I'm not waiting for my paper to dry. I don't want my paper to dry. I want to apply this white gouache when the paper is still wet, so it kind of spreads a little bit too. So I added a little bit like this, the white gouache with that round brush too, but I rather splatter the paint. So now I'm just going to grab that ratio, so the milk-like ratio of white gouache. And so white gouache and water is milk-like ratio, and then grabbing it on that mini mop brush and then just spattering paint. So using my finger to kind of like rub it off my finger, and that's how I'm just kind of letting it out there on the paper. A little bit of my paint, the white gouache, got mixed actually with quin red, so the snow is not so white if I like when I looked at it up close, but that's okay. And then you want to splatter a little bit over the trees too. Try to stay away from the bottom part of the painting, so where we haven't painted yet, so that area where we're gonna have snow on the bottom. So try not to have any white over there, because it's just, whenever I mix, or you mix like the transparent watercolors with gouache, which is the opaque watercolor, everything just becomes muddy, so you don't want that. So I'm just wetting, and I'm not touching the sky because I want to just wet underneath that, and I don't want any color to, or water to cause any blooms in the sky. That's why you don't want to touch the sky. So just wet it, and then we're going to apply very, very soft washes for the snow. Very soft. This is mostly cobalt blue with quin red, although I will add a little bit of phthalo blue yellow shade as well. Very soft washes, very light layer, and just some areas, just pick some areas. You don't have to add it everywhere, that's the thing, just a little bit, and then just kind of like chunks there. So let's say like on the left side I have that path, so I want to create some marks on the snow, and to do that I need to use some color and place that color wet on wet. And it doesn't have to be just one color. That's when we can use phthalo blue and with cobalt blue. So I just use now cobalt blue and quin red, but I will eventually add a tiny bit of the phthalo blue yellow shade at the very end. So a little more snow, and this is basically wet on dry now because the layer has dried. So I just want a couple more snowflakes there. So this is like a very controlled way, I guess, to paint the snowflakes comparing to splattering paint all over the place. But I want some of that snowflake to be more white. And whenever you use white gouache over a wet surface, then obviously that white will be more visible compared to when we splatter that paint over the wet background. Now, what I want to do, one more thing, is outside of creating like the snowflakes and stuff, I want to add more color towards that path. So that's one thing. And this is still wet on wet. And then another thing is I'm going to add some shadows next to those trees. But until we get to that, I'm still adding some color over the snow. So this is to make sure I have these marks so they're visible. And this is like, let's say from like some sleighs, right? Or anything like that. So I don't want the whole snow, which is fine too, but just to look like smooth. I still want something in the foreground there. It's like a path that leads towards that island, so this oasis of trees. And I do not have a reference image for this painting. I found a random photo online, and it's not like this, what I just painted, but something kind of similar, I suppose. There's some trees, but I made sure these trees are more in the middle. So I'm just using the tip of my brush basically to add a few more trees. So as much as like I painted the trees in the background there's some trees that are like in the foreground of those trees in the background, right? So there's some more trees in the middle section, and it's the same colors. It's just sap green, it's Van Dyke brown, and there's some of the indigo, but now I need to let it dry. And the reason I'm letting it dry now is because I'm not done, first of all, with the painting, and I still want to add the shadows. So this is the indigo, there's some of the cobalt blue, and then phthalo blue. This needs to be like a water-like ratio. So water-like ratio, there's just some shadows that I'm going to create for those trees, just a little bit. This is like a last touch, last thing that I want to add. And I just thought about it because that painting that we did with that kind of like a single tree in the middle of the snow, it had a nice shadow to the left. So that's when I thought, okay, this is good to add some shadows here too, just a little bit. So that's it, guys. And then the last thing is to remove that washi tape. So this is a very thin washi tape, but that's because I have a small sheet of a watercolor paper. But thank you so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I am looking forward to seeing your finished paintings.